Say if we use the hashtag media pioneers, get it, we're the Point Park's the pioneers, and the center is a place where we try to focus on what's the future of journalistic storytelling. So, how do people tell stories with their smartphones and laptops and all the tools that they have? And we're talking today about telling stories about the community outside of campus. Is it possible for you guys to be interactive? Are you able to answer questions? I mean, do you have some sense of what that would even mean, telling stories outside of the community, outside of campus, about the community? What do you think that means?
Or local interests, within around restaurants or activities or stuff like that,
Yeah, for sure. Like getting outside of the school and talking about your community. And so I wanted to start out this morning talking a little bit about why that's important, why it might even be significant. And there was a story in the New York Times recently about how, in a lot of places, the local newspapers have gone out of business. I mean, we've seen it happen all across southwestern Pennsylvania. And so in a lot of places, there aren't any professional journalists there any longer, and it's only the student newspaper. The example they give here is the college newspaper, where this woman says, if we weren't covering it, no one would know what's going on. And I imagine that's true for a lot of your communities as well. And it's not just limited to high school or to college students. There's a couple examples there of high school newspapers having an impact on their schools, where, in one case they discovered the problems in the principal's resume. She said she had done things that she hadn't. And then in another case, the school tried to censor the newspaper, and the students were able to speak out about it. And so I want you to think about that a little bit broader today. What are the ways that you can have an impact on your community, and the reasons why that maybe is significant. I want to inspire you a little bit too by showing what other high schools are doing. When the pandemic started last year, this Sagertown High School, which is it's toward Erie, it's in Northeast PA, near Cook's Forest. The students said, they just were, at first they were told, well, you're not going to have school, you can't be here any longer. And they were like, well, what does that do for our student newspaper? I guess we're done. And then after a few days, the students were like, well, wait a second, we can start telling stories about our community. And this is a place where they don't have a lot of local news going on, not a local newspaper. And so they just started telling stories, and they weren't, these are not like hardcore stories. It's the same kind of stories you might do about your school, but instead they're doing about the community. So this is an example of somebody had set up, they were bored at home and they set up a moto trials course in their backyard. This was just a first person memoir story about someone saying, how scary it was for her to be, have her father go to work at a place where she was worried that he might get the virus. And then this is just a story about a local business in town. And I imagine all of you could think of, local businesses or things going on in your community, or things that you want to say yourselves about your broader community that you might want to share with others. And I would say, if you want to dial down more on what Sagertown was doing, or what some of the other schools were doing, we have a whole series of videos at centerformediainnovation.org, where we spent some time during the pandemic last year talking with high school students about how they were responding to the pandemic, and then also talking with professional journalists and some of the faculty at Point Park with some more. So there are more classes there if you wanted to dial down on that. The other high school that we talked with was Franklin Regional, out in Murraysville. And it was, again, the same situation where the students at first, this was video. The Sagertown was more of the student newspaper. In this case, at Franklin Regional, they have a video program where they were doing the news every morning. As part of the morning announcements, they would do the morning announcements plus some news. And the students, again, were like, well, we can't do, morning announcements, or what are we going to do with them? And after a little while, they said, let's turn our cameras on the community and start doing stories about what it means to, to be living during the pandemic. And so this was a video clip from a story that the students had, it was like, when people started doing, it was somebody's birthday and there was a parade past their house to celebrate their birthday. And so again, these are not like, major investigative stories, but they're just stories about, what it means to be part of a community and what it means to be in many cases, what it means to be a 16 or 17 or 18-year-old person living in the community. So, this is also an opportunity for you to tell stories from your own perspective. So often we only hear stories from the perspective of adults and professional journalists, but you all certainly have the tools to do this kind of work, with your smartphones, and you really don't need anything else. You can go out and do amazing journalistic work. So it raised the question, why not? I pose it as, why not do stories beyond school? But I could flip it around and ask, why do stories beyond school? So I'd be curious from your perspectives, what you all think about why you might want to do stories beyond campus.
I think that at this point, the only thing we stick in our newspaper that doesn't have anything to do with the campus news in a sense is we do a book review and a movie review. That's the opinions of the students. And then in February, we did a compilation of the 50 years worth of love songs for the top ones. We've done some other compilations of top records in the past, just to have some filler information. But
Yeah.
we've not gone outside to really cover what's going on in Carnegie. Our students come from 18 different school districts. So we could probably consider Carnegie our immediate community because that's where we're semi-located.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't relevant necessarily to a kid who's coming from Bell Vernon.
Yeah, well, I would say, I think that's a real advantage that you've got students from 15 districts. That's cool. And because of the pandemic, I don't know what your school situation is like. Are you guys on campus every day, or do you have some remote days?
We're on campus every day, except the odd virtual day where everybody's home, but that's very rare. But we do have probably at least 35 to 50 kids daily that are virtual for whatever.
Well, I think that's the advantage with this is that, if you did stories from your 15 different districts, think about the regional diversity you would bring to your student newspaper. Or do you have a newspaper, or do you do TV, or what do you guys do there?
We do have TV and we do a monthly newspaper.
Yeah, so I think you could have real impact. You could be doing stories that are important across the region, things that are important in one of your areas that are also resonating in others, and then you also could do just unique stories from each of your 15 districts, and I think that would be amazing. You basically at that point you would have a regional news outlet basically, which would give you the potential to do some real amazing things. So I want to take some time now to brainstorm a little bit and talk about, because it's hard to get your mind past if you've only been covering stuff on campus and in the high school. How do you then start thinking about, well, not only why would I do stories about my community, but how would I come up with story ideas, and what kinds of stories would I do? So I want to go through some different examples of how you might start brainstorming ideas and thinking about ways of getting there. And so, the first one is I think obvious, but it's a thing that people overlook, and my college students at Point Park often overlook, is just be curious, ask questions about why does that thing operate the way that it does, or why do I do the things that I do? We take so much for granted in our daily lives, and if you just start asking questions, asking that question why about so many things, you'll start turning up interesting story ideas. Another thing is just to look at the world in a new way, which also sounds super basic, but I challenge my college students all the time. We take a walk from Point Park's campus, which is in the, sort of on the southern edge of downtown. And we walk from there into Market Square. And I ask the students to look for things that they've never noticed before. And, these are places that they walk past every day, just like you walk down your high school halls every day, and you walk on your commute to school. And yet we find things. There's a plaque that's right across from campus that says, William Thaw was born here in 1907. And then you're like, well, who is William Thaw? Does anybody know? Have you guys heard of William Thaw?
The rich guy who killed somebody.
Yeah, rich guy. He was like the Donald Trump of his time, but he's been, kind of forgotten to history. And so, but at one point he was important enough that people thought he was, they wanted to put up a placard to show where he was born. And so, that raises a lot of interesting questions about, the value we put on, money and celebrity and those sorts of things. And then around the corner from the CMI, the building where the Center for Media Innovation, which is the thing that I run, around the corner from where we are, there's another plaque on the wall that the Republican Party actually held their first convention where our building is. And so, it was formed somewhere else, but they had their first convention there at the Lafayette Hotel. And it's the kind of thing that people walk past all the time. It's kind of like hidden behind kind of a crummy bus stop. It's not at all heralded, but think about the kinds of stories you could do about that, especially every 4 years when the Republican Party holds their convention. It'd be great to do a story about, well, the first convention was held in Pittsburgh and it was held in this location. The other thing is to talk with people, have conversations. And that's one of the hardest things for a lot of people, especially since, we've gotten used to being on our smartphones and looking down and watching videos of other people. But if you're able to just go and have conversations with people and find out what they're talking about, and what they're thinking about, and what things that are interesting to them, that will definitely spark story ideas for you. Reading flyers. So again, real basic, but when you're walking around, look at the flyers that people put up about upcoming events and things happening in the community, things that might spark for you that, maybe you do a story about the event itself, or maybe there's something about the event that it's part of a larger trend that, sparks a story that way. You can revisit a major event. So something that happened, obviously, for a lot of us who are older, the 9/11 every year on September 11th, we see stories about, it's been 20 years since 9/11 and how has the world changed in that time? What are some other major events that you guys can think of, things that would be relevant to your lives that you might revisit and say, what's happened since this major event happened?
The election this past year.
The election. Okay. Yeah. That'd be what's happened since the election. How have people's minds changed? For me, I have a 1975 Volkswagen camper van. And so we drive it around for camping. And, you saw so many of those communities out in especially the rural areas of Pennsylvania where every house had a Trump sign and then one house or two houses had a Biden sign. I wonder all the time, like, how are those people surviving? How have they been able to see each other as neighbors, or are they still caught up in the election? So yeah, that's a good example. What are some other examples? COVID? Yeah, so I mean, we're already starting to see it, right? We've seen stories over the last couple of weeks saying like, oh, it's the anniversary of the first COVID death in the United States, or it's the anniversary of the first, the first reported case in the United States. And of course, March will be a big time for people saying, I can't believe we've been stuck going through the pandemic for a whole year at this point. So, any others?
I feel like major sports figures, like if you're a sports writer, obviously, like for example, like Tom Brady, I was like kind of like undisputed, like the best football player, now.
Yeah.
So stuff like that.
Yeah, that'd be great. I mean, you could also do, how long has it been since the Pirates were relevant? There were all those stories about, the Pirates 25 losing seasons, and it feels like we're in another trough right now. I mean, it seems like a deeper trough. So yeah, I mean, you could definitely do stories with, as we're thinking about opening day and players reporting to spring training. How long has it been since the Pirates had a relevant spring training? So, and you also might find stories, closer to your campus as well. You could localize a national story. So think about a trend that's going on and then talk about how it's impacting people in your community. So, it might be something, honestly, I mean, the way that, young people, I have a couple of young people in my life that, and then of course the college students, and you guys seem to always be on the cutting edge of new trends. What are some national trends or things happening that you might be able to localize to Pittsburgh or to closer to your campus?
I think like vaccination.
Okay. Yeah.
Happening everywhere, but obviously there's like the federalism aspect of like state to state, how it's different.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a great example of people. One of the things you're seeing now, people jumping the line, right? Like young people getting the vaccines before, while there's still a lot of 75-year-old people who can't get the vaccine because they're not fast on the computer. So that's a great example. What would be a couple more? What's like the latest thing on TikTok, or I don't even know. I mean, whatever you would, what are some of the things that people are doing on social media that you're seeing that maybe you could localize?
Well, I feel like over quarantine, there was a spike in like individual activity. Like people started golfing a lot. A lot of people picked up like skateboarding, just things you could do on your own. A lot of people started doing stuff like that.
Yeah, that would be great. I would love to see a story like that about how people during COVID started skateboarding. That would be awesome. Yeah, and similarly, I remember seeing some stories about bicycle shops like being overrun last summer. Not being able to keep up with demand, and we're kind of heading back into that season for outdoor activities. So yeah, that's a great example. Okay. And then I think just finally is just to think creatively, which again sounds super simple, but the reality is a lot of people don't do it, and that's the difference between people who are successful and ones who get stagnant. Is can you constantly encourage yourself to think creatively about finding story ideas and looking around at your community and seeing things that other people have missed, and asking questions and having those conversations, and just seeing the things that other people don't see. And so that's the last tip. So I want to take a few minutes and have you all brainstorm a little bit for ideas on your own. I'm going to give you probably about 5 minutes, and just have you think about like what are some of the things that you try to come up with. We've gone through this, come up with as many ideas as you can, and then we'll also talk about what are the best ideas. So quantity, how many story ideas can you come up with, and then what's the quality of story ideas. So I'll give you the next 5 minutes. We'll come back at 8:43 and talk about what you found. Okay. So you got like a minute. Just try to scribble down as many ideas as you can at this point.
I had an interesting idea about how I feel like personally during quarantine I started doing like a lot of gaining a lot of habits. Some of them good, some of them bad, but some of them were actually good. Like I started a new fasting diet, something like that. I started golfing. I'll give you examples. But maybe ask like students, like, did they pick up any beneficial habits through quarantine and stuff?
Yeah, I would challenge you to say, not just talk with students, but talk with people, right? Like, why stop at students? You can do a story about what people are talking about, right? I mean, what kind of habits they brought up. I think that's what I'm trying to challenge you guys today to think about, is that you don't have to just be limited to your immediate community on campus. You can be, connected to your Catholic community. So that's a big part of being Catholic. That's a big part of your education and who you are, and your connection to it. So that's a big community. And then just the broader community that you're part of as well.
When the other schools, like Franklin Regional or that Sagertown, wrote about their community, how did they get the newspaper out to the community? Or was this additional information just for the school? Or
they were no, that's a good question. I think in both cases they were distributing online.
okay, so they would put it like up on Facebook, or how would they hope that a senior citizen would see it?
Yeah, Facebook, social media, but also their they had a website where they were sharing the content. So that's a really good point. Yeah, if you're just printing and distributing on campus, then you're not going to reach that audience anyway.
Because currently what we do is, last year when I took over the paper digital online, because we weren't allowed to publish a print version anymore, so we do it through InDesign, and then it's on distributed to the students through the school's email. Then we do put it on Facebook. It's sent to the alumni. It's sent to our theaters.
Yeah.
Who come to the place, and then it's on the school website, so they can look for it. And some alumni read it comment. But, you know, I don't know if the average alumni.
Yeah, I think my point with this whole discussion is just that you all are a resource at a time when journalism is under threat across our region and across the country. You know, you're out there doing original stories, and you know that represents a real advantage and a real resource that, you know, can be a service to certainly your campus community. It can be a service to your Catholic community, and it can be a service to your broader community, wherever you know, the areas that you come from. So I'm curious, who thinks they have the most story ideas? Who came up with a lot? Give me a number.
I had three.
I couldn't hear you. How many?
Three.
Three. Okay, that's a lot. Who had more than three? Everybody had two or three? Come on, guys. I had my students sometimes come up with dozens. So, you know, think about when we end the session, just write down ideas. They don't have to be great ideas. They can be terrible ideas. But if you write down 10 ideas and you think they're all terrible, I guarantee you show them to you know, your classmates and the editors of the paper. They're going to think two or three are going to be good. So don't be afraid to just put down lots of ideas and see where it goes. So let's hear some more quality ideas. We've only got a couple of minutes left, but what were some quality ideas that you had beyond the habits?
I was thinking of how different parishes are like dealing with COVID right now, and how they are like affected, and how they're like looking back at like this past year, like what they had to do with COVID, and how it's affected them.
I couldn't hear that. Could somebody closer to the mic repeat it?
Because Catholic, we were saying how it differed with COVID through the parishes over the past year, how does it affect, you know, mass attendance or spiritual life, all the different changes that the churches had to make just to conduct the mass. Or
I love that idea. I think it's great. I mean, that's been one of the biggest changes, right? People not being able to gather. And so it's changed people's whole relationship to their religion and to their faith. So yeah, I think that would be an amazing story. And you could see how that would be a story that you might have a section about students, but then you might also have a section about, you know, just other Catholic people and how they relate to the religion and how it's changed over the last year. I think that'd be amazing. Let's get one or two more.
She said how different people now started to do their own shops online, like making jewelry, doing little.
Yeah. That would be an amazing story. I just saw a statistic about that's a great example of localizing a national trend, because you could find stories out there about, I think the New York Times on Sunday had a story about how Etsy, the number of people selling stuff on Etsy has gone up like 60% over the pandemic over the last year. So then you could localize that by talking with people in your community who set up their own stores over the last year, or, you know, or who are crocheting or making their own clothing or doing that. That would be amazing. So is that the end of our time? I hear the bell.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Good luck. Keep thinking about this stuff. And if you want to chat anymore, you can hit me up on email. I will share it with your teacher.
Thank you so much.
All right. Bye-bye.